We want to start off by recognizing that today in the United States is Veterans Day, and we want to recognize and thank all the men and women who have served and are serving in the defense of our country. And while we're at it, for those who serve their countries with distinction and pride. So we honor that and thank you very much for joining us. And we're also pleased to present key findings and implications that we see for broadband service providers from our recent analysis of broadband data usage. As you can see, today's theme is speed. In the third quarter of this year, businesses brought back workers in larger numbers, though to the new reality of hybrid workdays. Last month, the Wall Street Journal reported that 36% of the US workforce was back in the office during the first week of October. But that also means that nearly 2/3 of the workforce continues to work from home and play from home. And the implications for service providers are momentous. Tuesday's Comcast outage, cited by Comcast as network issues, shut down access for millions of users throughout the United States. Network growth and planning benefits from a data-driven approach. And speaking of that, we're excited to share with you the results of our analysis of the data and these trends, which includes a sustained drive toward higher and higher demand for speed. This has tremendous impact on providers and how they maintain and plan their networks. Fortunately, there are solutions available, such as the kind that OpenVault provides, that enables broadband providers to identify and proactively approach subscribers with an upgrade package that will improve their user experience while also improving ARPU for service providers. So you've come to the right place. Welcome. I'm Larry Siegel, and I'll be serving as your host on today's webinar. I'm going to talk a bit about our role in developing this groundbreaking report and then turn it over to our CEO and founder, Mark Trudeau, who will take us on a deep dive into the key findings and their implications for broadband operators, especially on how they can take the same views we have on data usage and leverage that for improving their subscribers' satisfaction while increasing revenue for you. As we go through our findings, if you have any questions, please submit your questions here on Zoom in the Q&A box. If we don't respond during this session, we will follow up with you. This is our latest in our 10+ years of providing industry-leading solutions and the council to help you decide what to do about it. For over 10 years, as a matter of fact, yesterday was our 11th anniversary, OpenVault has focused exclusively in helping broadband providers manage their networks more effectively and proactively, improve revenue and profit margins, and provide subscribers with a higher quality of experience. Everything starts with the analytics of actual usage and network data, which includes a vast amount of built-in deep domain expertise. From that, we get results that drive a broad set of actionable and automated solutions, which are 100% cloud-based, easy and quick to deploy, and which generate industry-leading ROIs. We unlock the power of your data. Now, about this report, our tools that we just talked about gather broadband usage data generated by our 150+ broadband customers in North America, Latin America, and Europe. And once within our platform, we create a holistic pool of data across millions of subscriber data usage records, into which we execute a series of powerful analytic queries ranging from overall usage, tiered usage, plan migrations, and geographic characteristics. These then yield insights which have implications for broadband providers. We share these insights and their implications for providers with our quarterly OpenVault Broadband Insights Report advisories, or OVBIs, such as the one we'll be talking about today. Now, to get into what we found in the third quarter and how this compares to year-over-year visibility, here's OpenVault's founder and CEO, Mark Trudeau.
Great, thank you, Larry. Appreciate it. Just a few highlights, and we'll get into the details of these as we go through the presentation here this morning. Usage growth has continued, even as hybrid kind of back to work and stay at home, is occurring. We still see continued growth. We also see a continued delta between the growth of that we're seeing with flat rate billing subscribers, in other words, those that offer unlimited usage in their broadband plans, versus those that have usage quotas, or the usage-based billing, the UBB operators. So we'll dive into that. Power users certainly on the rise, and those the amount of subscribers adopting gigabit speed tier usage speeds are rapidly accelerating. And one of the things that we will be focusing on today is what we're calling speed clipping, which really does impact network performance and subscriber satisfaction. There is a big monetization opportunity out there for operators who understand this and can have visibility and transparency into which subscribers are actually bumping up against their speed tiers. So we'll do a deep dive into that as well.
Thank you, Mark. And in the spirit of active participation, we're going to start with our first poll. We'll have two polls, and we'll start with the first one. Based on the clear trend toward higher usage and the growth of higher speed plans, as we've talked about, and the implications we've seen, and we're going to see more as we go through today's presentation, how prepared do you feel you are in your network planning? How prepared do you feel you are in your network planning? And here's what we found. Most people feel somewhat prepared, and some are very prepared, a couple neutral, and a few folks need to do a little more preparing. Well, let's talk about those results, and maybe afterwards you'll see how prepared you really are. Year-over-year average monthly usage growth that we've seen confirms there is no going back to pre-pandemic levels. We've jumped up and we keep on going. Back to you, Mark.
Yeah, so as Larry said, growth has continued. We're looking at 13% more usage per household than we saw last year at this time. And for those of you that have been on a few of these OVBI webinars, you know that 2020 obviously was a very interesting year in observing usage per household, with April actually of 2020 being the highest usage we had seen on record, and then things kind of settled back in over the summer. And then we saw, as we entered the end of the third quarter and certainly into the fourth quarter, usage again started to grow even beyond the April levels. So when we compare now to last year at this time, we're still seeing growth even over and above those numbers. So it's clear that we're never going back. We've talked about this a couple of times, but it's become more and more evident that what we saw pre-pandemic is gone forever in terms of usage volume per household. Now, I talked about the fact that there's a big difference between usage observations that we see for those operators that offer unlimited plans versus those that have usage quotas. And the spread seems to be expanding. If you look a year ago at this time, we saw the average usage-based billing operator have 377 gigabytes per household, while the unlimited usage providers had 392. That represents between 4 and 5% delta. Now we're seeing almost a 10% difference. So in other words, those that are offering unlimited plans, we're just seeing usage grow much faster, 52% faster growth, higher growth rate than we saw with usage-based billing operators. So it's clear that usage quotas are in fact helping to curtail usage, making it a little easier from a network management perspective to handle the usage growth. So that's an observation that we've made in the past, but it does seem to be more and more evident here as we move forward in this new environment. Now, sticking with that theme and looking at median usage, median usage historically has continued to grow at a faster rate than mean usage, indicating that usage is growing across the customer base. It's not just that a few power users are dragging up the average usage. It's actually usage growing really at all levels. And you can see when you look at the growth rate of the unlimited providers versus UBB in terms of median usage, it's vastly different. So again, it's something we're going to continue to keep an eye on, but it's clear that that usage is just exploding when you have unlimited plans. So we'll talk more about that here when we get to power users in a second. Yeah, so with power users, we're looking at, we always look at the 1 terabyte and 2 terabytes. Those of you, again, that have seen these OVBIs in the past, we used to track 250 gigabytes, and now since the the mean usage across these different households is more than, almost double that, we don't look at that as a power user anymore. We're now starting to track the 2 terabyte and above users, and you could see the growth of those super power users has been tremendous, almost 50% increase over last year at this time. We did see a slight decrease from the end of the second quarter to the end of the third quarter, which is, by the way, not uncommon. And this is, something that we've reverted back to the typical seasonality that we've seen, where December, January are typically very high, and that's maintained through the end of the first quarter. Then we see things dip a bit in the second and third quarter, and then as we expect to see, we'll see growth here as we get into the fourth quarter. So, but huge increase here in terms of true power users, and this is something that has a big impact, obviously, on the operator networks and network health. Now, back to the theme of, how does this compare when you look at unlimited billing, the flat rate billing versus the usage-based billing? This is, again, where we really see a big delta. Usage-based billing plans, that have quotas in place clearly help to protect the networks from, just a vast amount of power users, where in the unlimited scenario, they attract super power users. That puts a little more strain on their networks. You see a higher percentage there of, certainly if you look at, the 2 terabytes, 1.6% of subscribers using over 2 terabytes of the unlimited scenario, where it's 1.3% in the operators that have UBB in place. So again, something that we have to continue to pay attention to. Yeah, so, again, back to the seasonality, it's pretty clear that seasonality has returned. In 2020, kind of all bets were off, as we all know. Even though we're kind of back and forth with what's going on with the pandemic and restrictions and all of that, it does seem that typical seasonality has returned. And we expect to see increased levels here as we get into the fourth quarter. In fact, we're already seeing that in our October numbers, and we'll talk about that down the road here. So again, when we look at super power users, and these are often the users that are causing network congestion issues. Operators really need to pay attention to this. They need to pinpoint who those super power users are. And when you're a flat rate or unlimited, broadband plan operator, you're having to pay attention even more to that, because you are attracting the super power users, and you're not curtailing that usage by having usage quotas in place, which obviously happens in the UBB environment. Yeah, if we look at consumption from third quarter of 2018 to third quarter of 2021, we also look at the lower end of the spectrum and how many subscribers are actually consuming 100 gigabytes or less of data. And you can see that has gone down significantly. Now, on the other hand, those that are consuming 500 gig up to a terabyte has nearly doubled during that 3-year time period. So, we kind of look at the distribution of usage as well, not just the super power users, but how many users are on the low end. So an argument, around usage-based billing that a lot of operators put forth is, well, we implemented usage-based billing so that we could be fair to our subscriber base. If we have unlimited billing and we need to do a rate increase or something, we're actually penalizing those subscribers that are using a small amount of usage and not really causing any network congestion. So that is an argument we hear from the UBB providers, and one that certainly makes sense when you look at these kind of numbers.
Thank you, Mark. And now, poll number 2. So get your fingers ready, crack your knuckles. Here we go with poll number 2. Imagine adding a tool that identifies subscribers whose usage encroaches on their speed tier limits, so you could upgrade them to a higher ARPU package and improve their satisfaction, and by the way, your revenue. Would you be not at all interested, somewhat interested, very interested, or extremely interested? A new tool. Imagine a new tool that does this. Let's see if this is of interest to you and your colleagues. Why, yes, this is something of interest. Well, lucky for you guys, because we're going to talk about it right now. Back to you, Mark.
Thanks, Larry. Yeah, before we actually get into the speed clipping, just a little bit more about the speeds. We've talked about how speed distribution has changed over time. Here we're seeing that, speed tiers that of subscribers that have less than 100 megabits per second are in significant decline. Part of that is because many operators have made the move to proactively actually increase their minimum speeds for all subscribers up to at least 100 megabits per second, and in some cases even higher. So we're seeing fewer and fewer subscribers on those lower speed tiers. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, there's a huge adoption of 1 gig service, and that's a combination of subscribers' behaviors changing. They know oftentimes that they need faster speeds. Operators that we see out there are doing a lot to promote 1 gig service. So now we're seeing literally, nearly double what we saw last year at this time in terms of the percentage of subscribers that have gig service. So it's growing, faster, certainly among the UBB subscribers. And this is a theme that we've talked about in the past, that we tend to see more upgrades and self-selected upgrades in those operators that have usage quotas in place. And that makes a lot of sense, because most usage-based billing programs are set up so that if you move up in speed, your quota rises as well. So it gives you some headroom in terms of your own usage growth before you would get hit with any overage fees. So we often see upgrade adoption much greater amongst UBB operator subscribers than we do flat rate billing. Yeah, and if we look back to what this looked like before the pandemic, we actually have now 4.5 times more gig subscribers today than we did 2 years ago before the pandemic. So it's a tremendous adoption, and again, operators are marketing this oftentimes with pretty aggressive pricing schemes. So I think we're going to continue to see this widespread adoption of gig service.
Thank you, Mark. So now we come to it, kind of the heart of what we want to talk about today when we get to speed. We've identified speed clipping as a trend that service providers should track so that they can proactively identify performance issues, help subscribers choose the higher speed broadband packages that provide better experiences. So let's get into it. Back to you, Mark.
Yeah, so really what we're talking about here is, there are obviously many choke points, potential choke points in the network that cause subscriber quality of experience issues. Those could be at the access network layer, peering links, et cetera. But one thing that oftentimes goes kind of overlooked is the size of the pipe going into the home. And there's never been a better time to pay attention to this, given what's gone on during the pandemic and the change in usage behavior among subscribers, right? So, whereas, in the past, we'd have a household that, people would be at work, we'd have people at school, et cetera. Now, oftentimes you have everybody home at once, streaming, their own content on whatever device they have, online gaming, video calls, Zoom calls, et cetera, all kinds of things happening. So because of the fact that there's been such a change in usage behavior, there's a need for more bandwidth in many households. And what we see is that one thing that's not often looked at is, we'll see customers calling into customer care, trucks being rolled, et cetera, because of slow, quote unquote, slow internet. When in reality, that subscriber might simply be bumping up against the speed that they're provisioned for. So what speed clipping does is it shines a light on who those subscribers are. It basically says how much of the pipe is being used at the household level that the customer is actually provisioned for. Because if we can identify that, then we can certainly avoid a lot of issues, a lot of phone calls, a lot of truck rolls, and the like. So that's what speed clipping really does. It takes a very granular approach to looking at the usage, the speed that's actually being used by the subscribers, and comparing that to what they're actually paying for. And we've found that there's a lot of mismatches there. So we look at 80% really of a provision speed as kind of the threshold where issues start occurring, and degradation of service, poor experience we start to see once a subscriber reaches 80% of their provision speed. Now, if they hit it once in a while, that's one thing, but if they're consistently hitting it and constantly bumping up against their speed tier, they are absolutely candidates for an upgrade. And that's one thing that we really need to highlight here, because it's not necessarily a problem with the access network itself. It's really simply you need this granular level of analytics to figure out what the real issue is. And that's what speed clipping is all about. Yeah, and as I mentioned, this is what there's a high correlation between subscriber expense issue here that operators experience unless they look at this stuff, unless they really analyze it to this level. So this is just a representative couple of charts here to show an operator's how much it's changed here just since last year. So this is just looking at the percentage growth in subscribers that have reached these different thresholds, and kind of focusing on the growth that we're seeing per hour. And you could see a very significant increase in the number of subscribers that are achieving this 80% of their available bandwidth. So more and more subscribers, to say it simply, are bumping up against their provision speed. And that's on the downstream side. The next chart shows on the upstream side as well. Interestingly, we're seeing a big increase in subscribers exceeding that 80% threshold of their upstream speeds in the 11 p.m. to 12 a.m. hour, which is interesting. But across the board, really, and we all know that upstream has been an issue, and it's grown tremendously, and it's one of those parts of the network that oftentimes for many operators, they have less capacity to deal with. So it's a big challenge. So just to talk about, when you're looking at the analysis this way and you're diving into speed clipping, and you're using it as a tool, right? So you're using it to arm your customer care groups and your sales groups, in some cases proactively going out and taking action and bumping up people's speeds, or suggesting upgrades when they are bumping up against their provision speed. It has the effect of improving quality of service, which of course improves net promoter scores. You can also avoid node splits. If you're a DOCSIS operator, a lot of times, nodes are split and planned for node splits once phone calls start coming into customer care in a certain area. Well, that could simply be that those subscribers are misprovisioned for their level of usage. So rather than split a node, if you split a node and the subscriber is still provisioned for what they were before, they're still going to have issues. So it can really help you from that perspective, reducing phone calls and truck rolls, and therefore reducing your OpEx, and ultimately increasing your ARPU, because as they upgrade to higher speeds, that's going to come with a higher, monthly recurring fee and higher ARPU for the operator. So everybody's happier. While the subscriber might be paying a few bucks more, they're getting a much better service for their needs. So when we look at, it's no surprise that when we look at the percentage of subscribers at these different speed tier levels that are exceeding that 80% threshold, it's no surprise that the slower speeds that are being offered, we're seeing a higher percentage of those customers reaching at least 80% of that available bandwidth. And then as you move up to the faster speeds, you get up to the 200 to 400 megabits per second range, less than 10% of people are bumping up against that speed. But it kind of shows you where your opportunity is. And we've looked at this data across many of our operators, and we're estimating roughly 20% of all subscribers are really candidates for speed upgrades, just simply based on their usage behavior and the fact that they're using up a good chunk of the pipe that's going into their house. So again, just a depiction of some of the analysis that we do. First step is really identifying, how many subscribers are exceeding these thresholds. You have to look at it really, almost per day. You look at the amount of subscribers that across different speed tiers are approaching their limits. The next slide kind of shows you need to look at this really also hourly and look at some heat maps and understand which subscribers and when they're actually exceeding these thresholds as well, because that can go a long ways towards helping explain to the subscriber that, hey, you're every Friday night, it seems you must have movie night or game night or something at your home. You might not be a super power user using 2 terabytes, but you're consistently having issues every Friday night, as an example. That subscriber is a candidate for an upgrade. Their usage behavior is indicative of somebody that just needs faster speeds and a bigger pipe going into their house. And that's exactly what speed clipping helps you identify. Now, we also look and have looked historically here over the last few OVBIs at what's a typical household look like. You saw up front that we're now seeing an average of 435 gigabytes being consumed. You can look at the breakdown there of downstream versus upstream. In the bottom right and the smaller boxes there, you can see how that compares to last quarter. And you can see, continued increase in really almost every area. When you look at the average downstream speed, it's now gone from 231 up to 253. Upstream speeds have increased as well on a weighted basis. So we continue to see more speeds. And as we've talked about in the past, more speed equals more usage. There's a high correlation between speed and usage per household. So we'll continue to track this, but we expect that those trends certainly to continue. So just a few conclusions. Certainly operators are exhibiting more seasonal patterns that were typical of, we saw it beginning in the second half of the year, kind of getting back to seasonality. Big adoption of the gig speed tiers as well. Those are certainly some of the key observations. Right, so there's a combination of a lot of subscribers still provisioned for the slower speeds, but yet a huge increase in the amount of subscribers that are consuming lots of data. So it's exactly that kind of intersection of those data points that is kind of makes speed clipping really important, right? So still a lot of subscribers with slow speeds, but usage behavior changing. That is a recipe for subscribers using up a good chunk of the pipe, and a recipe for driving upgrades and ARPU, frankly, and customer satisfaction. Yeah, so targeting these subscribers is again critical, and we'll talk a little bit for a second. So how is this data really used, and how is this analysis used? There are a couple of different things that operators do. One is, they arm customer care with this information. So when a subscriber does call in and complains of slow internet speeds, customer care can pull this up and say, hey, you know what? You're actually using all of the bandwidth that you're provisioned for. So we're going to recommend an upgrade for you because your usage behavior has changed over time, and you simply need more speed based on the usage behavior from your household. So that's one way to do it. Another is, again, kind of providing sales with a list of these subscribers that are ripe for an upgrade and being more proactive about it. So avoiding that phone call into customer care altogether by doing an outreach and creating a campaign around this to be able to drive upgrades for a specific set of subscribers, very targeted. Yeah, and so what do you need to really accomplish this? You need the tools, you need the visibility and the analytics, and you need to understand how you compare to your peers, et cetera, and what where do you stack up in these different areas? And every network is different for sure. I mean, if you're an operator, to use an extreme that offers gig service to everybody, you're not going to have speed clipping issues. But really, it depends on what speed tiers you're offering, what are most predominant in your network, and what's the subscriber adoption been across your different speed tier levels. You need that level of granularity combined with all the data collection and analytics that goes behind this kind of tool in order to accomplish everything we've spoken about here. So just a really quick, this is just a quick depiction here coming up of our solution suite. We focus on a couple of really key category areas. One is helping you optimize your networks and diagnosing issues and helping you get the most out of your available capacity. We have a number of solutions that help you do that. On the other side of the equation is, the opportunity to help you monetize your growth on your network. I mean, you need to align growing demand with growing revenues as an operator. For many of you that are MSOs, video is clearly going away. Broadband is the wave of the future. How do you align that growing demand with growing revenues? So a lot of our solutions are focused on that. And by the way, these categories are not mutually exclusive, as we've just talked about. Some of these things in the analytics and the different actionable solutions that we have can help you both manage available capacity and monetize your network at the same time, all resulting really in better quality of service for your subscribers. So all of these things really do work together. And the nice thing is, because of that, the different solution suites are, we have customers in our operator environment that are engineering, they're from marketing and finance and senior management. These are really very much cross-functional solutions that shine a light on all of these things for these different functional areas of your business.
Thank you, Mark. Before we go to Q&A, just wanted to let folks know that this is a preview of the actual report. There is a full OVBI report that will be coming out shortly. Once that's published, we will send it to you automagically. It'll just show up. And so thank you for attending, and we'll give you the full written report shortly. And then with that email, you'll also get a link so that you could share it with others that you want to have them come and download our report. So we did have some questions coming in, and let's get started. The first one is about speed clipping. Mark, regarding speed clipping, how do you do the calculations and get to the specific subscriber to offer upgrade packages?
Yeah, it's a good question. So if you think about speed, right, it's really the function of usage consumption over time. So you think about speed being, megabits per second. So our ability to collect usage information at the subscriber level in a very granular time period is what allows us then to take that usage divided by that time period to come up with the speed that's being, of the data being consumed. So that's effectively how we then compare that data to what's provisioned for the customer. So we can collect that provisioning information from the network itself. We can correlate that with the billing plan that the subscriber is on, and then we compare that to the calculations that we do at a very granular hourly level to be able to see just how much of the provision speed is that subscriber using. And that's ultimately what goes into the calculations and how we arrive at subscribers that are, bumping up against their speed tiers.
Thank you. Two more questions came in about speed clipping. What can an operator do with the dashboard view and reporting that we just saw in speed clipping?
Yeah, so kind of talked about this a little bit, but really it's a couple different things. One is just giving visibility to customer care. Customer care is the group that's obviously receiving inbound calls from customers. A large percentage of phone calls into customer care are related to internet speeds, right? People that are having issues. We've done some correlation analysis of, you saw the heat map that we showed, the ability to look at when subscribers are actually having issues or using a good chunk of the pipe going into their home. That's exactly the same time that phone calls happen to be coming in. So strong correlation between subscribers that are, quote unquote, in the speed clipping category and phone calls that ultimately drive truck rolls. So Number one is really giving customer care that visibility so that they can proactively suggest upgrades before a truck is rolled and before, that's done, frankly, unnecessarily and sending field techs out in the field. And again, many operators use the, kind of the list on a monthly basis of those subscribers to do outbound campaigns, whether it's email campaigns or even just proactive phone call outreach to these subscribers to try to drive upgrades. And ultimately that has the effect of avoiding phone calls altogether and truck rolls.
Thank you. Last question on speed clipping. And you may have addressed this a little bit earlier. How does speed clipping correlate to power users? In other words, how do you explain the relationship between monthly usage volumes and speed clipping?
Great question. I mean, there's certainly correlation there, but at the same time, they're not 100% correlated. So in other words, you do see subscribers that might not be considered super power users, but again, from time to time, they are actually up above the threshold for speed clipping. And that's just due to the usage behavior in the home. I mentioned, an example of, game night or movie night, or it might be, in today's world, you have a lot of hybrid scenarios with the workplace. So you might be home on Mondays and Fridays and in the office Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Well, maybe every Monday, Friday, when everybody's home working at the same time on these types of Zoom calls, that's when you actually see the speed clipping. And again, they might not be heavy users, they might not be power users, but they are certainly candidates for upgrade based on their very granular, when you examine at a granular level, their usage behavior. So correlated, certainly, if you're a 1 and 2 terabyte or higher user, you're gonna probably experience, the speed clipping issue more often, unless you upgrade your service. But you'll see lower end users as well running into this issue.
Thank you. All right, last question. OpenVault, please take out your crystal ball. And what is your forecast on usage in the fourth quarter?
Well, growth, right? Certainly. And I think it was earlier this year on maybe it was after the first quarter OVBI or that we were asked the same question. And we predicted that by the end of the year, we would see somewhere in the neighborhood of 600 gigabytes per household. And I would say that based on what we're already seeing in October, the second and third quarters are always the lower months. And then we see a decent sized spike as we enter the fourth quarter. So I would expect us, I think that's probably fairly accurate, that we will see close to 600 gigabytes per household by the end of the year, which is mind-boggling when you think about it. And again, some of you know this, but when we started this business, Larry mentioned that was 11 years ago yesterday. 250 gigabytes was a super power user, and there was 0.5% of all households that used that much 11 years ago. Now we're looking at the average household using 600 gigabytes by the end of the year. So crystal ball, that's what I would suggest is occurring, which makes it, again, some of the speed clipping stuff really, really important for operators to pay attention to. It can really drive a lot more customer satisfaction and again, get to aligning your revenue growth with demand growth.
Thank you, great seer. And thank you, everybody, for attending. Keep your eyes open for the delivery of the OVBI coming your way soon. And obviously, if you're interested in any of the solutions that we talked about, we're here for you. Contact us to set up a discussion or a demo, and we could talk about how we can provide actionable insight into your network with our suite of tools that improve network management, increase ARPU, customer satisfaction, and retention. Thanks again. Have a great rest of your day.